Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about how I learned to be kind to myself and what happened. So this is part of a series I'm doing of 7 days of personal shares. I can definitely do 7 days of relationship shares after this as well. Or if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below if you're curious about anything. But I really, have noticed the power of like sharing stories and how that can be such a powerful educational tool, and also just help us sort of see things from like a relatable point of view. So I decided to come on here and share a little bit about some of these things. I get a lot of questions about a lot of this stuff, so I figured why not. So I want to start by sort of saying, as many of you know on this channel, like I was a fearful avoidant, leaning anxious, preoccupied. I was definitely in like a mind warp of a place growing up. I had a lot of like unresolved trauma. I struggled with addiction at a young age. Right before my 15th birthday was my first sort of beginning of my struggle with addiction. Had a lot of healing to do as a person, and really in many times and many moments thought like, oh, I'll just be like this forever and I'll just not live that long. Like I had like all these kind of chaotic stories like, oh, I'm just going to struggle with addiction and just I'll do my best and I'll probably have a shorter life. Like I know this sounds so dramatic now, but I just kind of like thought that about myself for a very long time. And just thought like, okay, like I won't get out of this kind of thing. And I later learned a lot about the subconscious mind and the immense power of if we really target things at the subconscious level and heal and retrain our subconscious mind with like new concepts and ideas about ourselves, how much healing is possible and how much peace is possible when I just didn't even really know what that was growing up. But that wasn't like where I started in my healing journey. And before I got to that point of actually understanding the like technical point of view and understanding how the subconscious mind works and how to repattern or recondition things and all that kind of stuff, I did just realize like how much my internal dialogue sucked. I realized how mean I was, how cruel I was in my internal dialogue and the relationship to myself. And as somebody who grew up exposed to a good bit of like criticism and, third party challenge and just a lot of chaos and a lot of like really not so healthy dialogue towards me from a number of different sources and forms, including relationships, things like that. I realized like, wow, like all the people I resent in my life for speaking to me in a certain way or talking to me in like a verbally abusive kind of form, all the people I'm like holding on to this like seething resentment around, that I feel did that. Here I am treating myself in exactly the same format. I'm literally speaking to myself in the exact same way. And it was this really profound shift. And what I came to learn a little bit later on is that when we get exposed to repetitive dialogue towards us, the repetition and emotion of something imprints the subconscious mind. And so the way I was spoken to, I had come to learn to speak to myself. Those were my patterns. That was part of my subconscious comfort zone. And my subconscious mind wanted to keep these patterns alive. And so what essentially was taking place is I had become, these people who had spoken to me this way, had become that person in the relationship to myself. And it was kind of this rude awakening for me. And as somebody, as I mentioned earlier, who struggled with addiction, I also realized no wonder I want to numb my life because I want to avoid myself, right? Like I want to avoid the way, like, think about it. You follow you around all day. You don't go anywhere. Research shows we think roughly 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. There's a big study done at the University of Southern California's Neuroimaging Institute years ago. And, it's known that this is how many thoughts we have. And if I'm thinking the vast majority of those thoughts about how I'm stupid, how I'm not good enough, how I'm messing up everything, I'm a failure, I'm an idiot, what's wrong with me? If I'm talking to myself like this all day long and saying even worse things to myself and nitpicking my appearance and nitpicking my body and nitpicking every action I take throughout the day and my worth in the world and my future, and I'm never going to succeed at anything. And if I'm just constantly putting myself down all day long, well, no wonder I want to escape. No wonder I want to numb, because how uncomfortable is it to sit with yourself in that, right? And it's like, it's intolerable. I wanted to avoid and escape myself at all costs all day long. And it was the internal dialogue within me that I was really trying to escape. And the really interesting thing is that research shows us that our repetitive thoughts, right, create emotional output. And our emotions are made up of neurochemicals. So when I tell myself, oh, I'm an idiot, I'm worthless, you know, these things, and I really did at one point in my life speak to myself like that, then how do you feel when you're thinking those thoughts? And and then, you know, how do you neurochemically experience that, right? Like you have these huge cortisol responses and norepinephrine responses. It feels bad. And so you think these things and you feel that way, and your neurochemicals follow suit. And then actually neuroscience has proven that every action we take is based on our emotional state. So, you know, then you do silly things, you avoid, you numb, you hide, you push people away, you don't let people in, you know, you do all these things from this place of coping. And a lot of what we're just coping with is like these programmed patterns of dialogue at a deep level. So I got really into researching this stuff, because when I kind of realized like how awful I was treating myself in my thinking and how prevalent this was, and started noticing it. And I was like kind of in this healing journey at this point. Like I was trying to research and figure out why I was struggling with all these issues, and, you know, what was happening inside of me. And you know, one thing that I did fervently was I sat in meditation daily. Like I really got something out of it. And I remember the first time I meditated, I don't know if anybody listening has had this experience, but I remember the first time I meditated, it was like, I just felt this feeling of peace. Like I felt like, okay, my goal is to not think of anything. And I didn't really know what I was doing when I was meditating. I just had heard from a lot of people it helped. And I was like willing to try and do anything, because I was not in a good place. And all I did is I like turned this noise on, and it was like a sound of like a fan or something, some kind of like white noise. And I just focused on trying to listen to that noise. And I'm very auditory as a learner. So I think that just happened to be like the exact strategy I should have been using for meditation. But I was able to just like listen to the noise and just stay focused on that. And of course, thoughts would come in and interrupt it, but like just having a break, just having like a break from that constant stream of like beating myself up and internal dialogue, worried about the next thing, or afraid, or feeling out of control, or feeling upset with somebody, or resentful at somebody, or, you know, feeling not good enough in some form, like just a break from that. I remember the first time I was sitting down having that experience, and I just felt like this feeling of peace wash over me, like this, like just for like that little moment to get a break from that was so powerful for me. And then it really kind of put into perspective, like, oh, it feels so peaceful to have that experience, because I'm so not peaceful in my resting point, like my internal dialogue. Sorry if you hear my Slack, I'm going to quiet it. My internal dialogue toward the day was just so intense. And so, you know, then I started like really sitting in meditation, and I started trying to observe the types of thoughts that would just come up on autopilot, and just kind of get in touch with them, right? Because I realized like, hey, I'm thinking so many thoughts all day, and maybe I'm aware of like some of them, but I'm not really that aware of like all the patterns. I'm just kind of like getting in touch with it right now for the first time. So I would sit and I would try to notice like what was there. What were those like autopilot thoughts? The moment that I would like lose my focus from focusing on this like noise, what would I think about? And I noticed how much fear was there for me. And it was so funny, because I wouldn't have ever really considered myself a fearful person. I feel like I, you know, was strong when there was scary stuff, and I would be the one to kind of like show up for scary things, or push through, or whatever, be fearless, or be tough, or whatever it was. And I realized like, oh my goodness, like so many of my thoughts are like, what if this happens tomorrow? And then this happens, then these people are going to think this way, and then I'm going to be a failure. That, you know, just all these thoughts, and how busy my mind was, how occupied my mind was with that. So as I started to get more in touch with all of that stuff, it was like, okay, well, this sucks. What am I going to do about it? And trying to figure out like how to start being aware. And I was kind of like researching about thoughts and autopilot thoughts, and just trying to figure out like all these different things. And soon after that, I started doing a certification. I was in university at the time, and I started doing a certification on the side in CBT. And it was so interesting. I would have a lot of these experiences when I was healing, where like this like spiritual teaching, or this, because I was reading about like all these different spiritualities, like Hinduism and Buddhism and, different things from a whole variety of different sort of sources, spiritual teachers. And I was learning about CBT, like questioning your thoughts, like challenging your thoughts. And I also came across the work of Byron Katie, and like her and CBT line up so interestingly because they both get you to question your thinking, like, is it true? And I realized like the power of just that, because I would sit in meditation and I would go, tomorrow this is going to happen, or, this person's going to reject me, or this thing's going to happen. And I would tell this whole story. And if it was on autopilot, it would get really colorful, right? It would be like, and then I'll have no friends, and then I'll be out on the street and have no way to pay my bills. It would be like, how we think in those extreme worst case scenarios. And I realized I could just sit there and be like, can I really know that that's true? Can I actually know that that's going to take place? And it was like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, will tell you a lot of like how to return to fair and balanced thought, how to get out of this like one-sided story and just return to like center. And center really means like, of course, anything could happen, but also I'm not going to emotionally invest in the scenario where this is going to happen, right? So like, it's like when you sit and you think of, let's say somebody's scared to get on an airplane, and they're sitting there in their seat and they're like, what if the plane crashes? What if the plane crashes? They're not like, oh, fair and balanced thought. Of course, a plane could crash in theory, but statistically it's low and it's probably not going to happen. And driving in a car is more dangerous. Like you're not like thinking from fair and balanced thought. When you're like, what if the plane crashes? You're like, the plane's about to crash. And if you pay close attention, it's amazing how much your thoughts like actually make you feel. Like when you're sitting there thinking, like you're sitting in your seat in the plane, and you're thinking, what if the plane crashes? You're imagining the plane crashing. Pay attention to your body, your physiology. Like you're like, sometimes people are shaking a little bit. You feel all the adrenaline, the adrenalized response. You've got all the cortisol. You probably notice the tensing in your shoulders and neck and body. And like your thoughts are making you emote, and then they're making you react physiologically and behaviorally. And so I would sit and I would just learn, or I would sit in meditation and just these stories about how I'm this or I'm that, or I was going to be this way, or I was never going to get what I wanted or needed, or, I was going to be all alone, or all these like scary things. I came to see this as like the mind attacking itself, right? Like there it goes. Like, and, understanding later that this was the result of like subconscious core wounds and imprints that had sat in my subconscious mind and imprinted my subconscious mind. And then they were just reiterating themselves on autopilot. So for example, if I had a core wound that I'm trapped, I would think of these narratives in my life. Like I would sit there on autopilot and maybe I'm driving home from work or something. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be trapped forever at this thing. And it's because that was my subconscious comfort zone. So my subconscious was trying to keep this alive. And, so I would sit in meditation and I would try to just notice this stuff and then question it. And I'd be like, can I really know? Can I really know that? And then I realized like to give proof, to really push on the other side of it, like why might that not happen, would be where I would actually get rest. So if I was going to be like, okay, I'm going to reach out to this person that I'm interested in, let's pretend, and they're never going to want to talk to me. They're just going to reject me and ignore me. Or I'm going to apply for that job and that's what's going to happen. Or I'm going to try to get into this program and that's what's going to happen. I'd be like, can I really know? And do I have any evidence for otherwise? Like, why might something else take place? And that would be what would kind of like put me over the edge of like feeling like, oh, this was also possible. And I would find that like proof and evidence. And I came to know later on that the subconscious mind actually speaks through emotion and imagery. So when you actually give evidence, it actually lands at the subconscious level, which is like where these problems are existing in the first place. And I just learned to start like challenging my thoughts all the time, like just not investing in this like train that was like all these chaotic things that were going to happen, all these terrible things that I was, and all these. And I kind of coupled that with like making a commitment to myself that, and this sounds funny, but like truly this commitment to myself of going, I will not speak to myself in a mean way. Like no matter what, that's my goal. That's my like promise to myself. If I do, I'm going to reframe it and I'm going to apologize to myself. So if I was like driving home and I missed a turn, normally at the time, my internal dialogue would have been like, oh, you're so stupid. Like you never pay attention to stuff. And then instead I was like, I am promising myself, I'm not going to do that. And of course, like the subconscious mind is going to do what it's going to do on autopilot, but I would correct it. So, and I started noticing it because I was tuning into it. I was paying attention. So if I missed a turn, and I actually can remember like a very vivid moment where I did that and I missed a turn, and I remember where I was driving and everything. And I remember being like, I'm so sorry for calling you stupid. And it sounds funny now, but it's like, and I was like, I'm so sorry for talking to myself that way. Like, I'm not stupid because I missed a turn. Like, people miss turns, people make mistakes. And I would try to like humanize myself. And I just made a commitment to do that. And I went from like being like 9.9 out of 10 critical and mean to myself to being like, I just don't really say mean things to myself anymore. Like, I don't notice that I do at any point. I used to be really conscientious about it. Then I just realized, okay, that's like pretty much gone. And if I make a mistake, I'll be like, oh, that was a mistake. And I want to be accountable. I want to fix it. I want to grow. Or like, oh, that was a mistake. Like, what can I do? Like, oh, that sucks. Like, but it's like, that sucks. It's not like I'm bad, I'm an idiot, I'm this and that. It's like, oh, I'm a human. That was a mistake. Okay, I have to fix it now. And just that did a few really interesting things for me. By the way, if you want to do like a deep dive into this stuff, we have a course just for this. I made basically all the courses out of PDS based on like really powerful life lessons that I learned, and then like taking the education and technical components of like helping you understand it and bridging these things together. That was pretty much the inspiration for all the major courses at PDS. But you can check out the Emotional Mastery and Belief Reprogramming course, which is literally like teaching you how to uproot your painful beliefs, your internal dialogue, and noticing the reaction of like how your beliefs and thoughts affect your emotions and actions, and how to actually recondition all of this. It's like one of my favorite courses at PDS, and you can check it out for free for 7 days using the link in the description box below. But what I came to notice when I changed these things, when I actually like learned to recondition my internal dialogue, I came to notice that I had so much more patience for my mistakes and so much more ability to be accountable. So it's like in the past, I would notice that when I would make a mistake, I'd be so busy caught up telling myself how I'm bad or I'm a mess or whatever, that there was no room to be like, how can I solve for it? I would just like be so mean to myself, and then I would want to numb out. And then instead I realized like, oh, I can see that I'm a human being, see that I'm not perfect, see that like I'm not supposed to be that way, and that I'm here to learn and grow and sort of figure stuff out and try to evolve, and have mercy on myself for that, have some grace on myself for that, and take accountability and learn whatever the lesson is here for me. And it helped me not feel so like if I did something wrong, I wasn't so defensive. I wasn't so like avoidant. I wasn't so like ashamed. I would instead be like, okay, I messed up. And if I needed to tell somebody that and say, I'm sorry, I had room to do so without all this defensiveness and needing to avoid the shame associated with the mistake and thus avoid accountability. I noticed that when other people made mistakes, I had more mercy and grace for other people because I got it. I was like, oh, you're a human too, like me. And it helped me be kinder to myself dramatically. It helped my emotional state be way more balanced. And I noticed how much more energy I had. I know that's such a funny thing, but I noticed how much more energy I had. I felt kind of like, okay, I wasn't giving all my energy to pain and suffering and negativity about myself and beating myself up and putting myself down, and then trying to like balance it out and recover and run from myself. And all this energy that was tied up over here now could go somewhere constructive and productive. And one of the big things I noticed as I really changed my internal dialogue is how much room to create I had, how much I wanted to create things and share things, and how much room I felt to do that like more effortlessly. Probably because I wasn't just over here giving all my energy to nothing, to attacking myself. So that was really beautiful. And how much room I had to talk stuff out with people, how much room I had to feel, again, when people made mistakes, to just not make it mean something terrible about me being unworthy or not good enough, and not make them a bad person, but just be able to go, okay, we're humans. Let's figure it out together. What do we want to do next? How do we solve for it? And a lot more compassion towards myself was a practice, right? Just, hey, I made a mistake. Okay, what was going on for me? Trying to understand what happened when I made the mistake. Like, what happened right before I made the mistake? What was the big unmet need, or the scary story I was telling myself, or the fear that I had? And then having some compassion to myself for, oh, I was afraid. Oh, I was wounded. Oh, I have to solve for that and do some work on that. And it was so powerful. And I think probably two of the most important lessons, I mean, I talked about it on this channel. This is part of the 7-day share, but I just, forgiveness and the change of the inner dialogue. And they kind of go hand in hand because, um, forgiveness also meant self-forgiveness, and change of the internal dialogue kind of naturally gives you self-forgiveness. It's like you make a mistake and you're not harping on it to yourself, harboring it forever. You're able to just move through it and do what needs to be done to solve for whatever problem is there. And that was really powerful and helpful. So that's it for today. Let me know any questions you have, any other like things. I mean, I actually really enjoy sharing this. I was like, oh, I'm used to sort of teaching, but I'm happy to share and hopefully it's supportive for you and helps you with where you're at in your journey. And hopefully you realize too from some of this, which is my intention, I was in a really tough spot. Like I was like struggling with addiction. It wasn't just attachment style stuff. I was struggling with CPTSD. I was super FA. I had a lot of volatility, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of like emotional poison within me. And I spent time and I didn't give up and I like really showed up, and I'm still not perfect. But from where I was to where I am now is like the biggest change and difference. And it was just because I was not going to sit with what was going on. I was like, I'm going to find a way to solve for it. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep practicing doing something different. And I just did it for long enough and repetitively enough that eventually it feels like your whole world changes. And it's funny because now I used to like be so in misery and so in suffering, and that was what I knew. And I protected it in a weird way for a long time. And now it's almost hard for me to relate to sometimes. Like I'm like, oh, that was my truth and that was how I lived, but I don't feel like this emotional tie to it in this painful way. And sometimes it's almost funny. Like I'm like, and just to shift so much. And the reason I'm saying this is because for anybody who's sitting going, I don't know if I can change. I don't know if that's possible for me. It's too hard. I've been through too much. Like I thought all those things too. And just when you learn a little bit about the subconscious mind, like things can be reconditioned, your patterns can change. It's not easy, it takes work, but it's all possible. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next video.